Welcome, Asanka. It's so exciting to have you right here in Singapore. Thank you so much for joining us on Lanka Live. I know this has been a long time in the planning, and we're really excited to have you in Singapore and a guest on Lanka Live.
Well, thank you for having me, Lucky. It's been an honor to be here, and we're lucky to be able to make this happen.
Exactly. And for those who might not know, we launched Lanka Live last year, which is through the Singapore Sri Lankan Business Association, which is a nonprofit. And the objective of Lanka Live was really to spotlight inspiring Sri Lankans and stories coming out of the country and really bring a human face to the country and also change the narrative around Sri Lanka beyond what we read in the news and, anecdotal information from elsewhere, is really to talk about the wonderful people and inspiring stories that are coming out of the country. So really this was part and parcel of the journey of the Singapore Sri Lankan Business Association. And so we're really excited to have you in Singapore. Welcome to Singapore. It's been a long time since you've been here.
Yes, it's been a few years since I've been here and a lot has changed for the better and looks gorgeous. I had a time to just go for a walk today, so it's really nice. I'm looking forward to see more today.
For many of us, you are very much in the brand you've created in Sri Lanka, sort of a household name now, LOVI Ceylon, which really was a long time coming in the sense of reimagining traditional Sri Lankan attire and the sarong in a modern way.
Yeah.
I don't know why it took that long, but it clearly took the right person to bring it to the forefront. I think beyond just the fashion, I was surprised to learn as I got to know you that you spent many years, over 20 years in Silicon Valley and in New York in technology. You studied in the US and you studied computer science, and you also studied in the Harvard Kennedy School of public policy. So you've had a life before fashion.
Yes.
So I was really interested to learn as someone, my day job is a lawyer, but I am really, if I had a choice, I would have done something, very different perhaps. But
it might come in your path,
Right now it's just, wearing LOVI. But I just wanted to understand also, I always really intrigued to know what really your childhood was like growing up, of course, in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are a lot of experiences you had which would resonate with mine growing up during the Civil War, so on, and what inspired you, and really the people and experiences that you feel have shaped you and your journey in many ways. Are you able to share a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a middle class family. Went to St. Peter's in Bambalapitiya, from kindergarten through A levels. Did math. I was actually supposed to go to Katubad, the engineering university, but during those times it was always closed. So almost out of frustration, I just applied to university in US. And then, one thing led to the other. Within 3 months, I was gone. Another 20 years, essentially, in tech and public policy and lots of product design. And I really learned a fair amount and had a chance to travel quite a bit around the world because of the types of jobs I had. And that was an eye-opening, especially coming from Sri Lanka, where the exposure, I think, is quite limited. I'm grateful for that opportunities that came.
So it's sort of the typical Sri Lankan child, a lawyer, doctor, or an engineer. So the engineering path, but it took you to tech. And I'm sure that experience in the US being so different, vastly different.
Yes.
How do you think those experiences and the people you met in the US kind of shaped you and impacted your journey?
The challenges and even the ideas, the confidence to think the way they are thinking, and the risk-taking that is involved. The thinking in scale was totally new to me, even moving to San Francisco. I think in my last kind of 8-9 years before I moved here, I was lucky to be in San Francisco, and I really saw how the startups are thinking and how you're thinking in scale, like Google or Facebook or Instagram or Airbnb, how you really learn how to kind of take a somewhat of a basic idea, and then you just kind of build an amazing and company, amazing product and service. Just that idea was very, very new. And seeing how to do it, also learning that, I think that kind of really changed my mind.
And what motivated you to come back to Sri Lanka? Because when did you come back?
I came in 2016, so almost 9 years now, and really, really happy that I made that decision. The more time goes by, I think what a crazy decision I have made. At that time, it didn't look so, but I am very, very happy that I made that decision, because I wanted to largely come look at what the new Sri Lankan identity going to be, because fashion was not exactly my first really was decision, coming from a tech background. If you had told me 10 years ago I'd be running a fashion company, I think you'll be like joking to me. Any fast growing nation has a very strong idea about who they are or who they want to be. And that is built into their identity, their narrative, their, the way, their vision and their hopes and dreams. And I was trying to see how can I build this kind of an idea of authenticity, confidence, hard work, ambition into an identity that is going to come. Diversity, multiculturalism, all these aspects that we value. How do you build that into an identity? And how can I make it so approachable that the message is passed without actually being passed? Because without trying to get into political language, how can you just empower?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the cross between fashion and culture. And that's the essence of LOVI. It felt like the most authentic thing. And if I can build this identity that was essentially lost, 10 years ago, nobody seemed to be, really thinking about sarongs that much, or for that matter, any of our clothing. So to kind of revive it and kind of infuse the values that we hold dear, and that would actually help us build a more stronger, prosperous Sri Lanka. That's the idea.
And was fashion something you had formally trained in, or was it something that you discovered along the way?
I have no formal training. Lots of tutorials and classes on YouTube I have taken since I started this company. But I always loved fashion. I loved the fact that you could actually make something, that you can make somebody happy. Everybody wears. Everybody takes a shower in the morning, looks in the mirror and thinks, what do I wear today, right? And you can give a certain amount of confidence and beauty to a person's life just to even make them smile, even if you're having a hard day with clothes. And I've been lucky living in New York and even San Francisco to an extent, that I was exposed to like fashion and what it can do to a person's, confidence, to their integrity, all of that.
And also, I feel with the amazing thing about fashion, other than, obviously me wearing this, I feel very different versus me wearing a sweatshirt and pants.
Yes.
It's such a different feeling on how you carry yourself and the gravitas you have and walking into a room and the confidence and so on. And I think what I love about your clothing is that there is something for everyone and it's all quite unique. I see your Instagram and I want that. It's all so unique. And I always think about what inspires your collections. What do you think about? You recently did that collection that was all turquoise with the flower prints.
Yeah.
And I've got one of your outfits, which is just stunning. And I think people just ask me, well, who made this? Where's it from? What really inspires you every year? Do you find it a struggle every year to think about things, or?
Not at all. I have 1,000 ideas in my head. The hardest part is how do you really bring it to life. This type of clothing, this kind of even hand embroidery, it's new to us. new to our clothing. So you have to build not only the clothes. To build the clothes, you have to build the craftspeople. You have to find them. You have to train them. You have to get them to commit to the certain level of quality and even timeliness and all of those kind of things. That's the more difficult part. The inspiration is all there. I mean, in a certain way, the love of our culture, love of our people, love of the place, that inspires, and then also cross that with what's happening in the world in terms of fashion or lifestyle. Then it's not. That's the easy part. The inspiration is the easy part. The hard part is, okay, how do we actually get this to in real the type of quality and we want.
Another thing about, I think, fashion and why I think it's really important. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, it was all about sort of designer bags and all of those things, when you it's sort of your big first paycheck, you kind of go, okay, I was first bag was like a Karen Millen, a leather bag. I was so proud of it. But as time has passed, I'm now more into buying from local designers. Like if I go to Manila, I want to go to the local shops and buy from the local designers who are not priced that cheap either.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm not just buying it because it's cheap, I'm buying it because of the craftsmanship and so on. So I really believe in shopping local in countries, and that is a big change from where I was 15, 20 years ago. The question I would have also, I mean, it's what I think is amazing about fashion and supporting local designers is the social impact as well of what you do, because it's basically supporting an entire community of craftsmanship, which some cases are dying craftsmanship, traditional craftsmanship. So what has been your journey there with LOVI and all your collaborations you do? What do you find has been the biggest social impact?
We all want culture, because that's kind of the driving part of giving us pleasure and joy and even pride. The people who make culture has to be sustained also. So, the artists, the craftspeople, if you take the condition of like Sri Lankan, many of that kind of craft has not really changed. So what happens is over time, the craft person is making the same kind of product, but the market has shifted. Mm-hmm. And this is where designers and, local designers can really have impact, because they are essentially the translation between the clients and the craftspeople. So what we are doing is essentially figuring out how to add large amount of value to a client's life, and also by that transferring that to a sustainable, economically sustainable model for the people who are doing this. We are very strict about how much we are paying, in the sense that it has to be a livable wage, because otherwise no point of creating designs. It pushes the burden on the design, so that you actually create something that has enough value that the whole chain can be sustained.
And that is also another question I had, because I think when people come to a place like Sri Lanka, I guess maybe they have, for example, Bali as a reference point, for example. I know there's been general rhetoric pushing against this idea of Sri Lanka being the new sort of something.
Yeah.
It kind of pushes what we might not necessarily see as sustainable tourism or sustainable consumerism, because there's real drive for cheap, because I'm Sri Lanka, so surely it must be cheap.
Yeah.
So have you found that that has been a challenge for you in terms of educating the local and international consumers about the value of what you're delivering and the price point as a result?
It depends on the segments that you're working on. And luckily for us, it's not been a challenge, because the people who come to LOVI, they already have either known about LOVI or the impact we are trying to create. And frankly, when you touch the garments, you can see the amount of work that goes into it, and you're probably thinking like, how do these guys manage to give it to at this price? Because most garments that we are selling, if you were to buy it in, I don't know exactly the Singapore market, but I know the US market, it would be 5 times that easily. I think the idea is to make it so exceptionally valuable, and also to be careful with who you're trying to attract, right? So I think that's where LOVI is pretty specific. We are not really in the mass market at all. So we are specific about what we are doing. And it has its own cost, because it's not easy to sustain a business that way also. But that's the path we have selected, and we are staying with it.
Who would you describe as the quintessential LOVI customer?
I think the quintessential LOVI customer is somebody who is cultured, sophisticated, has a love of Sri Lanka, whether they are born to Sri Lanka or just by love. That's the differentiation, and they want it for themselves, not necessarily to show, but for the pleasure of themselves. Even when you start buying luxury goods, you kind of over time you graduate. Initially it might be for the joy or excitement, but later on it's for the pure pleasure of having it, just for your personal pleasure. So if you look at like one idea is almost all of our clothing, the lining is as beautiful as the outside. And I want the linings to be, and we spend a lot of time thinking about what lining goes where. So just because that's the only thing you only see, and we want it to be pleasurable to you.
Yeah, what I found really amazing is because I remember running into you in the Shangri-La in Colombo and really needing a lama sari, which is a children's outfit for my little girl, Sarla, who was with me. And you just looked at her. You didn't even have a measuring tape. You looked at her and you designed, and then it arrived the next day, and it was fit her perfectly. But what I loved about it was you had added those little details, which I think you remembered from the shirt you did for Tim, my husband, where you had little gold leaves, and you had added that to the collar and to the sides, which I thought was just an amazing amount of detailing. But also the fact that you were able to tell what the measurements were going to be just by looking at her. But it just, that little detailing, and it just differentiates what is mass market from what is quite unique and bespoke.
It's just trying to give you pleasure. Like we all have busy lives, and it's a moment that you are sharing with us, and we want to make sure that we give the best try. Not we are always succeeding, but we definitely work the hardest, and we never give up on that.
To come back to how we started, which was about the sarong, and that was really, I think, the crux of what you started, right? Was reimagining the
sarongs
sarong.
with pockets. That was the tagline for a long time, because
sarongs with pockets. Yeah,
because I like staying factual.
Yeah, and I think it was crazy to me as I reflected, as I prepared for today, that it took so long for someone to come up with this idea. And what so I just need to come back a little bit on why I feel so personally passionate about it. It's because my own father, who is quite a nonconformist in his own way, he spent the 60s and 70s. He was in Africa and Europe, and then he returned to Sri Lanka in the early 80s. And he's quite proud of his culture and identity, and he's obviously a huge influence in my life. And he turned up for his wedding in 1982 wearing the national. And so my mom is of Tamil heritage and Christian. My dad is Sinhalese Buddhist. And so he was intending to create a bit of a scandal that he would turn up at a Christian wedding, because it was run as a Christian wedding. And my mom was in her white sari and all of that, with more of a, anglicized aspects to it. And my dad turns up in full national sarong and the long shirt. And the response he apparently got was incredible, that her entire family was very excited to see him, and he upstaged her, because much to
I
her
think that's
annoyance.
what she's upset about.
That was what she was most upset about. And there were lots of photos of him coming in laughing into the house because everyone was making remarks about his outfit. But it took that was the extent of the sarong, right? In a formal setting, it was in politics, the white and all of that, and in the home, it was the very casual sarong with no shirt and all of that, that the guys wore. So why do you think it took so long for this to become something that was reimagined and a mainstay? Do you think there was just no interest in it, or just an idea of it that it was so different and not appropriate for more formal settings?
This latter part is not true because the politicians, president, everybody wears it. So it was actually used for formal settings. But I think one issue was that we had just kind of gone on this kind of mimicking of all the Western clothing, and we have forgotten what we have also given up by giving up on this type of clothing. Like our own identity, the confidence that we feel, the differentiation we can create. You can walk into any room like this and,
And the
uniqueness, and they know you mean business.
Yeah.
I think those are opportunities we didn't quite see in that because we were kind of going along with, and then of course the war and all of that happened, and that kind of probably, made it even less because people were not thinking about fashion. People were not thinking about, identity even for that matter in that form.
It just took on a whole nother narrative.
It just like a lost 20-25 years, lost generation for that period from roughly 83 to about 2010, and then we had an opportunity, and I think that's why what inspired me to also come, and I felt like it was the right timing to come start because I felt that I would have a chance. A lot of us, our lives were our childhoods were partly defined by the trauma of the war, and I in 2016 I was thinking, roughly around 2025 there'll be kids who will be voting that do not have this in their memory, and how lucky we are. And I wanted to have started something to give them an identity that is beyond all of that drama. So that's why I figured it will take me about roughly 5 to 10 years to get to that place, so I better start in 2016. I think that was the kind of the calculation in my head that there'll be a new group of people coming who's not defined by this.
I also think that there is a degree of like the colonial influence, right? Because there is so much, such a complicated history to the country. So I recall one of the reasons my father liked wearing the sarong in the formal settings as well, I guess way before it was cool to do so, was because he grew up in the generation, he was still, part of that generation pre-independence. I mean, my dad was born actually 2 days before independence, but he grew up on the tea plantations where his father was one of the few local tea plantation owners. And so around them were all, white tea plantation owners and families. And there was that sense, and I think it came from, pre that as well, that people who wore the trousers and in the suits and so on, they were elevated, and the people who wore the sarongs and the local outfits were beneath them. Right? And I think there was this idea that wearing a sarong meant you were not of a certain class or status or position or whatever that meant. So I think what LOVI has done effectively is reimagining the sarong and reclaiming our identity in a modern, fashionable way. Because no one wants to wear it just for the sake of wearing it. I mean, if you're not a politician and you're not trying to make some sort of statement, you're wearing it because it looks good. And I think what you've also done really well is having it modernized for women. So I'm wearing what is effectively a sarong, and I actually wore this outfit for a legal conference. It was a big, large legal conference, and I was on a panel speaking, and almost everyone asked me where I got the outfit from. And I thought that was a great statement because I remember even time where wearing a sari may not have necessarily been appropriate, right? So I think it's about reclaiming our identity. And for me, that's what the sarong means in a way. What does the sarong mean to you?
I think it means confidence. In this world, in a globalized world, in a very competitive world, you have to know you can win. You have to believe that you can win, that you are as good as anybody else. Having the place of your birth be looked down upon, or you looking yourself down upon even, is the worst situation because you are already creating a handicap that is not necessary. So that is what the sarong is. That it just tells you, just you have to earn that. You have to be proud of who you are. There's nothing wrong with us being Sri Lankan. There's no handicap. You have the chance to go build anything you dream of, and the courage you need to have to go build it. And I think that's what we are really in our design. We are fighting to infuse that confidence that when you put these kind of clothes on, you feel it. I want you to feel it.
Yeah, and I remember like with Tim, he was wearing a sarong. He's worn a sarong a lot because thanks to LOVI, we wore the sarong at our 10-year vow renewal. And the next day at the christening, he wore another sarong. I think his mother, who had left Sri Lanka, I think in the 70s, said, "You're wearing a sarong again?" Because I think it's quite a unique thing, but I think we want to get to the point where it's no longer unique.
Yeah.
Because I go to places like Indonesia, I'm so impressed by how the Indonesians wear their batik shirts in meetings, in the offices, in work events, in weddings. They have normalized it, that this is what they wear, and they're proud of it. And I think we want to get to that point where it's no longer a unique thing to do.
That claiming the identity is claiming it for yourself, to give you the confidence to go be anybody you want. I think that's a huge driver of being able to build a successful country. Because I think Singapore we are here. It's coming on the 60th anniversary in a few weeks. I think couple of weeks. Look what a beautiful place they have built. And honestly, it's an amazing story. It's the model for so many other countries that have followed this same playbook.
Yeah.
So, and continue to follow this same playbook.
When I see Sri Lankan men in blue and black suits, a lot of black suits, in work events, at conferences, I think, please wear a sarong. It looks way better than a boring black suit.
We are working on it.
Yeah.
I think I'm so impressed with the newer generations for realizing this. And a part of the reason that we are really totally connected on the newer generation, they understand that the world that they are inheriting requires total confidence and not mimicking. And that opportunity is we are presenting to them to be who they are and to say, go get it.
And I think wearing it as well, the outfit for the first time, can be quite daunting.
Yes.
Because you will stand out. Right?
Yes.
So I think you have to get over that first and have the confidence to be
5
unique.
seconds of courage.
Yes. And a lot of guys, not to generalize here, but they don't necessarily want to stand out in a work setting. And so once you get over that initial hurdle, you it becomes normalized. More and more guys do it. And then it becomes like something that's the norm.
I think once you start actually, creating your identity to it, like you can get the benefits of like not only the fashionable benefits, but also the confidence benefits.
Yeah, when LOVI first came across my radar was thanks to our friends Aritha and Dave. When they got married, they were wearing LOVI outfits. And Aritha, I think, before that as well, was he was going for work events in London with his tux, and then he'd wear the sarong underneath. And he really brought it across a lot of our radars. Yeah. And he did a fantastic job.
He's a great ambassador for LOVI.
Yes. And, you've also done these amazing, work with people like Aritha, who have brought this onto so many of our radars, but also your collaborations with Tiesh, the wonderful jewelry designer I'm a big fan of, and Yohani, the fantastic singer as well. Those kind of collaborations and using social media and so on, I think is very much a big part of any brand in this day and age. How do you decide, how important is it first to you, but how do you decide what you focus on and who you collaborate with?
Some of it naturally comes, but it's the value alignment. I like people who see Sri Lanka as number one. I like people who, values hard work, dedication, ambition, all of these things. TH is, it's a home-grown brand, and, the brother and father, and then brother and sister. They are, working their butts off to really build something. Same for Yohani. I've met her so many times. I've never seen her just sitting around. She's always practicing an instrument or dancing or writing or doing something. So, and it's intelligently built in that. So that kind of value alignment is the most important thing. And then we are open to so many people, because we wanted to create, diverse, brand. We wanted to show our multiculturalism. So as the resources are available, we are working on many of these fronts.
Tell me a little bit about your co-founder as well, because I've seen her, your co-creative director. I've seen her in some of the ads, and she embodies the LOVI brand very well as well.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about her.
Yeah, so especially Natali, I wanted to, as we were getting more into women's wear, and I was like, look, I really need somebody with better formal training. She's one of the stars in Sri Lanka for fashion design. She's just finishing a PhD, so she's my friend for a long time. So I'm like, please come take over this part and take over even design, because as the company is kind of growing, there's more and more opportunity. And one of the things the very first I did was, even the name of the company is not Asanka de Mel, it's LOVI. It's named after the fruit, because I wanted it to be a platform that all kinds of talent can come and work. Natali, Johan, any one of the people, and hopefully in the future hundreds more of talented people can come and build a brand, build their careers at this company. So that was the idea. So I was very clear that it needs to outlast me. I'm hoping to build something that lasts at least 100 years.
And you've built this beautiful store as well in the Golf Face Hotel, which is absolutely stunning. Was it really important for you to have a brick and mortar store?
Yeah.
And what inspired the design of it as well?
We are trying to create what is modern Sri Lanka. And I wanted to have a place where our clothing is also like this kind of Sri Lankan clothing. You have a chance to experience it in a nice place. You can match the amount of effort we are putting into the clothes in similar place in the shop itself. So we wanted to create a nice experience that you can feel proud actually to walk in. You can bring your friends. We have many people, many clients who bring their friends when they're visiting from overseas, or their clients even for their companies. They wanted to kind of come show off LOVI, or they kind of come hang out.
It's an experience.
Yeah, come hang out, have a conversation about clothes, weather, kites, politics, all of it, sitting around those tables. So we wanted to have a place like that, and I think, it's just the start. Hopefully we'll be able to build a much bigger place even with this kind of beautiful setting.
And you also allow my naughty kids to run around and create havoc.
Of course.
So the work you did with the Sri Lankan Olympic and Paralympic team, dressing them, I think must have been a career highlight for you, but also to be ranked number 3, I think, by Sports Illustrated as one of the best opening ceremony outfits in the Paris Olympics. Surely that must have been a career highlight.
That is certainly a career highlight. When I first saw the actual design, the first prototype, actually, I was like, we have something special. The balance of it is there. So, but of course, you don't know what the rest of the world is doing. Because there's more, all the other countries coming up with their own versions. So we were very proud of the outfits we made, and then the ranking that, and all the fashion people, editors, all of them talking about it was just this the cherry on top. It opened so many people's eyes that we have something beautiful. I've been telling it for some time, but been ranked by almost all the top fashion editors, as something so unique and different, made everybody else realize in Sri Lanka and non-Sri Lankans that I guess we have something very unique and
for
beautiful.
a small country as well. For people to recognize the value of the craftsmanship and the work and the look of it, I think is pretty incredible. And for the athletes themselves, it must have been incredible.
Yeah, because when they were starting, as they were walking from the village to the opening ceremony, people were stopping them to take pictures with them because they all look, everybody else is coming in these sweats, pants and all of this. And these guys are coming like, princes, in very royal outfits. So actually the athletes messaged me and sent pictures saying other people stopping to take pictures with them. That must have made them feel very good.
That's pretty incredible. But now you've written a book as well, A Speech to Sri Lanka from 2048.
Yes.
I love the book and the cover in particular because it looks a little bit like my older daughter, Sarala. But I just found it really special. And you've had an accompanying film as well that has been screened. And it's really 2048 being sort of the 100 years from Sri Lanka's independence. And I think the story behind it is that it's a speech made by a woman who's receiving the highest national award in Sri Lanka, and of all the policies and initiatives that have got Sri Lanka to a point of GDP of 40,000 and getting Sri Lanka to that level on the eve of our independence and what that might look like for the country.
Yes.
And as a graduate, I suppose, of public policy as well, you must have taken a special interest in some of the policies that you outlined here. So give me a little bit of a snapshot of what inspired you to write the book, but also what were the key policies that you thought through as you were writing the book? And do you feel that it is achievable given the current trajectory Sri Lanka is on? A lot of questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions. So this is the book. We all want Sri Lanka to be a developed country, and we've been listening and hearing that Sri Lanka is a developing country. So I want to be very specific. Here, if you look at it, we set 40,000 USD, 40,000 per capita GDP as the goal. That's essentially the gateway to a developed country status, where the people's life and lifestyle can afford a developed country lifestyle. So how do we get, today we are about 1/10 of that. So how do we kind of get to that place the fastest? Meaning that then we have to do probably the minimum number of things we need to do to get to that place within about a generation, which is about a 25-year period. So I used the 100-year anniversary as a way to kind of link the two things together, how to get to 40,000 per capita GDP or a developed country. It's a fictional looking backwards. It has already happened, so that it is a little bit easier for people to kind of visualize it. The idea of this actually is like Star Trek. I don't know if you've seen this TV series called the Star Trek.
Of course. Tim is a big Trekkie.
Yes.
I have no choice.
And what happened was that it predicted so many of the technologies that we are seeing. It predicted one of the things was the auto-opening doors, little watches, devices that you can just clip on, that you can talk to. Before iPhones or before even mobile phones. It created and showed what that world looked like, and then allowed the engineers and entrepreneurs to kind of go build that world. That is what this book is doing. I am showing what a 10 times richer, a developed Sri Lanka looks like. And even in the movie, I'm trying to show what a developed Sri Lanka looks like. And giving the breadcrumbs on how we got there, in the hope that 100,000 entrepreneurs, policymakers, investors, go and build that new world. And that's the hope of this one, is to kind of lay out a very clear vision of what, that looks like. Because once we start looking that way, once we start imagining that, it's very, very difficult to go back. And in a certain way, that's what we did with LOVI, once you started wearing these kind of sarongs, it's very hard to go back to
A normal outfit.
normal sarong. So what I want is to have a real flavor of what that Sri Lanka looks like. What does it taste like? What does it look like? How people are living? What what kind of lifestyle that they could afford to have, and then hoping that group of people will this generation in the next 25 years we go build it.
And you said there were like 3 main policies and
Yes.
initiatives.
So-
What would that be?
One is how can we get our human capital developed to the point that people in 2040, and beyond are making roughly $60,000 jobs. How do we get them from today over the next maybe 20 years? Our institutions, our schools, our universities, our industries built that we are actually looking to the kids who are 10 today, when they turn 30, they are having $60,000 jobs or more. So if we can make that transition happen, then that problem is solved. That's number one. How do we create both get the 10-year-olds to get into $60,000 jobs, and the people between say 11 to and above to help transition. They are the transition generation, so they have to be educated enough to have enough skills and enough know-how and enough money to essentially train their children to leapfrog all of us. Think of our education development. Our education system needs to be kind of organized around this principle of bringing the kids who are 10 years or younger to $30,000, $60,000 jobs or above in the next 20 years. And then that middle generation, or the people who are between say 11 and above, are going to be the parents of those people who are coming. So, and they have to have enough know-how and money to kind of get these people into that. That's number one. The number two is essentially, as economies develop, one of the biggest challenges is does it have enough energy? When I'm meaning energy, I mean oil, electricity, gas, because the industries require power. That capacity building is a time-consuming effort. And generally the country's income or GDP and the energy consumption is kind of linear. So we have to really think about, okay, if we want 10 times richer Sri Lanka in 2048, then our energy consumption will be at least 10 times. So how do we kind of build and invest into those infrastructure development and opportunities? And these are also opportunities to kind of create new jobs, bring new technology, bring new industry into Sri Lanka. So that's the idea. And you have to do it, and in a country like Sri Lanka, because we have the opportunity to be relatively do it in a green way. How do you do it? By balancing the environmental needs, not to mess it up. We are lucky that we are in a position that even though we do have some serious environmental issues, we still have a breathable atmosphere. Our water is not totally polluted. So how do we protect it and make it better? So those energy development and environmental protection can be combined together. So that is the second area, so that it can power the growth of our industries to come. And the third area is that we are in the crossroads of the world. Half of the world's population, nearly 4 billion people, live in South and East Asia. Between China to Dubai to India is essentially half the population. So how can we take advantage of this? In another way, we have 5-hour flight from half the world's population. So how can we take advantage of it? How can we take leadership in regional matters, probably even in international matters, so that we create a brand of Sri Lanka that people can be part of and be proud of? So those are the three kind of principles. And if we can, because it kind of ties together, and all activities tied directly, are we getting to 40,000 with this, or we are not getting to 40,000 with this? If not, then you drop it and you keep the ones that help you get there.
What has the reception been like to the book from the public, but also to the film, the public, but also from policymakers and the government? Has there been any engagement, any feedback?
Almost any Sri Lankan who reads it, sends me a long letter as to why it has taken this long to have this book come out. Usually it's very emotional, the tears of joy, all of these kind of very emotional reactions that are happening. I think for policymakers also, how do we kind of get this conversation started? That's the point that we are in. If you ask anybody, you ask people like, okay, can Sri Lanka, grow by, 10x essentially in our income over the next generation? There'll be almost a question of disbelief. And if you ask, even could this happen in this century, and it's still somewhat disbelief, even though nearly 75 years is still remaining. So the question for us, the hardest question for us is, do we really want to be a developed country? I mean, not like little bit developed from 4,000 to 4,300 this, but do we really want to be a developed country? Do we have the courage to see it through? Do we have the commitment to see it through? And I think our generation, we are here, we have all the resources to do it. And if we don't do it, it's only our fault. I think blaming everybody else is, I think, foolish. We've been running the country for 75 years. It's high time we took some responsibility and say, okay, let's do it.
It is also like when you look at, Sri Lanka and you compare it to, say, Singapore, I always get this sense, because I do so much work between the two countries as well, there's always that wistfulness when, you consider Singapore, because in the 70s, Singapore was looking at Sri Lanka as sort of a role model in many ways. And how far things have come since then and changed.
Yeah.
And I think there's a general sense of wistfulness of what we could have been.
Yeah.
Not everything that's worked for Singapore can work for Sri Lanka. They're very different in many ways.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are some general lessons.
There are so many lessons.
Yeah. And what would you think those are?
There are so many lessons. One is, don't get into wars. Do you know how many wars Singapore has been? After being independent? 0. And we've spent 26 years in one protracted war, and also several other skirmishes between the JVP and the government, and then even before the 83 war, so many other skirmishes. So first, don't get into war. That is a good lesson. We are a civil society, we are a democracy, we have a parliament, we have a representative governments. Get it solved. These challenges, there are many models to solve it. Any kind of ethnic issues are essentially traumatic events to a society. It reshapes the narrative of, for a generation. But also then if you start doing, then you can start building. If you just firmly agree that any of these kind of issues can be resolved, peacefully, then you start establishing the economic development frameworks. People would want to invest in a place that grows. We have the one thing that everybody wants. We have opportunity. Everybody is looking for opportunity. Every company, every multinational, every government is looking for opportunity. We are at the crossroads of essentially half the world's population, and that half the world's population is the fastest growing in wealth. We are next door to India and not too far from Singapore and China. So if we can't make this happen, it's our own fault, and we should take responsibility. So the opportunity is there. It's the fundamentals are there. We have great infrastructure. We have relatively educated population.
Very high literacy rate.
High literacy rate. We can do so much better, but the opportunity is there, and we need to be confident enough that our culture is strong enough to have people come in, have people invest in it, have people build in it, and not be too greedy about taking all the upside just to us. Share it, let it build. I think Vietnam is also a very nice example for us, because after a long period of war, they have done an amazing job creating, really a strong economic engine by being open, by being confident. The US-Vietnam relationship, with all the history that they have, what an amazing recovery is that, right? And forward-looking experience. So there's enough stories in the world. I mean, there's nearly 200 plus countries. So if we look closely, we can learn from them. We don't have to reinvent everything. We can learn, adapt, and grow fast.
Very quickly, some rapid fire questions. If there was one takeaway you would want people to take from the book and the film, what would it be?
We deserve to be a developed country. We need to have the courage to want to commit to it.
And if you could give one piece of advice to a budding sort of fashion designer, entrepreneur in Sri Lanka looking to people like you as inspiration, what would that be?
Keep working on ideas till you have an idea that you are willing to commit for about 10 years. Generally, any idea that's big enough takes roughly about 10 years to kind of build. You can build it, just, be willing to stick it out for about 10 years.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. And
Yes.
I think Shahili said something very similar when we
Yes.
interviewed her. Also, finally, what do you think is the next chapter for LOVI
Yes.
and for yourself personally? I hope it involves a children's collection.
Yeah, no, for LOVI is essentially to imagine what this rich Sri Lanka looks like, and to show Sri Lankans what upper middle class life could look like in Sri Lanka. And for Sri Lankans living everywhere in the world, is what is that life looks like. And we are essentially creating that identity, essentially creating the products and the services of that lifestyle. And I wanted to kind of show we have inspiration from Ralph Lauren, from Armani, Prada, Burberry, for example, that kind of defined what that lifestyle, and so that people can go and build that. So we are imagining and creating that world, and we invite you to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Asanka, for being here. I'm so happy we got a chance to do this.
Absolutely.
And I'm very much looking forward to your next show in Colombo Fashion Week. I'm sure it'll be fantastic
Yes.
as always.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being here. And we are very excited for your next chapter, whatever it may be.
Thank you for having me, Lucky, and happy independence for
Yeah.
Singapore.
Yes, thank you.